Përshëndetje miq, jam sot në një podcast shumë të veçantë. Hello friends, I'm here in a special podcast today, very special podcast, because the guest is very special. Welcome, Joe Wilson.
Thank you. Shumë, fellow mandere.
Me and Joe, we are friends for 12 years, at least 12 years.
12 years.
So, and you have been like a friend, a big brother, a coach, trainer. We have been so many roles in my life, ministry, and the impact in Albania. But we'll break it into little pieces.
All right.
So can we go into, the first part would be, how did you get to know Jesus?
Yeah, so I grew up in a halfway Christian home. My mother was a believer, my father wasn't. Went to church till I was 12. When I was 12, my father said I didn't have to go to church anymore, so I quit going to church and I started smoking pot instead. So that was a bright moment in my life. So between 12 and 28, I had very different experiences in life, and I started heavily using drugs. And
okay.
And by the time I was 28, I hit bottom, and I woke up one morning and I felt like imagine an egg that has nothing inside. I was a shell of a person. I was totally empty.
Wow.
And
but it was like emotion, a feeling, or how would you describe that moment?
I felt like I was dead inside. There was nothing there. And so I asked God to help me, and my life started getting better. 3 years later, I became a Christian, and God began to train me and use me in ministry, and I started growing from there. So.
Only a little piece from the moment you felt that emptiness. How did you get to? Yeah, you said your mom was a Christian, so you had some. Who invited you back to church, or was a person, or was this feeling, or what was the moment?
No, when I asked God to help me, I started I found some 12-step meetings. And I went to a 12-step meeting every day for 3 years.
Just after that moment, so you pursue it. You didn't wait for...
The Lord led me to
step by step.
I didn't know He was leading me. I got to know God by experiencing Him and knowing that my life was getting better only because of Him. So, and then a girl invited me to church. She had been to a crusade, a girl that I knew. And after she got saved at the crusade, and they told her to go out and tell people what had happened to her. And so I was the one she told, and she took me to church. And
so good.
I became a believer in a couple of weeks from that time. So
you became a believer, got involved in ministry, and that was like a process preparing you for the next phase.
I became a believer in the day that I received Christ. The pastor who led me to the Lord on the phone invited me to come to the church, and he went through some material with me. He asked me, who are two people that need to know what happened to you today? He says, write their names down. I wrote them down. And he says, I want you to go tell them. And I was like, today?
Right away, you were evangelist, from born again to evangelist.
He also said, I need to get baptized. I said, okay. When? He said, how about Sundays? Okay.
Next Sunday.
Next Sunday. And then he says, also, I want you to participate in a program called Continued Witness Training. I'm like, what's that? He says, we train you how to share your faith from the Bible. And I'm like, am I qualified for that? Oh, yes, everybody does it. You know, pastors lie sometimes because everybody didn't do it.
The pastors lie sometimes.
Yeah. So watch out, teen. But so I went through a 16-week course where I memorized 21 scriptures, and I learned how to lead somebody to Jesus, to get them to the point and ask them, are they willing to turn from their sin and place their faith in Jesus right now, then follow them up, get them baptized, start discipling them.
Super. That was your start in ministry. We didn't talk not a lot at all about your family, but we're waiting for the moment, a little later moment. So, and then how do you got your calling into ministry? So we got, how can I say, you did ministry, but the calling was specific for a specific moment.
I served in the church for 3 years. And at one particular time, well, I kind of knew God had some plan for my life from the moment that I became a Christian, and people recognized that too. People would ask me, they say, "You're going to be a pastor one day?" And I'm like, I don't know. But when the Lord called me, and in our church, you had to make a public declaration of that. And it was a very not opportune moment, because I was working in a singles ministry as an assistant to the singles pastor, and he had a disagreement with the head pastor, so he quit. And it was exactly that Sunday that God says, "I want you to publicly declare that I'm calling you." And I'm like, "Well, God, they're gonna think that I want this guy's job or something. He's my friend." And then the Lord says, "No, it's today." So I did that, and interesting thing that, and this was a church that in the service there was probably 1,000 people. So I made a public declaration. The pastor made a big deal about God calling me into ministry. Everybody in the church stood up and clapped.
So it was a big innovation.
And then the next day, there was nothing. Nobody ever said anything to me again.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
I was on my own.
You are on your own. What about next Sunday and next Sunday?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, the only person that said something to me was a guy that was, he worked for it's like an army. We call it the National Guard. And he was full-time at a National Guard base in a nearby city. And after the Lord called me, he came up to me and he says, "Joe," he says, "you probably need to get started preaching, so I want you to come out to the base and preach 2 Sundays from now."
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." I'd never preached a sermon in my life. And he invited me to come and preach there. So I go, and he leads me into a big, huge room. And inside that room, there are like these giant school desks.
Okay.
Where there's a desk, place for books underneath, and a seat all connected into one piece. And there's like 150 of them in there.
Ooh.
He takes me in, and he sits me down. And I'm sitting there waiting for the people to come. And I'm very nervous. And so he comes in, and he brings all the soldiers in the uniform, and every one of them is 10 foot tall and 300 pounds. They were big.
Huge, giants.
They were big. I was about to throw up.
You had emotionally.
I was so nervous. I was going to throw up on the floor. I could barely keep it down. I was so nervous. And he introduced me. I stood up. I read the scripture. And I had peace after that. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I gave an invitation and asked people to receive Christ, and 14 guys got saved.
Oh, that
was my first time.
Anxious and not feeling safe, God used it.
God will use you, yes, especially when you overcome anxiety, fear, and when you're facing challenges, yes.
Yeah, so that's the mission in your country. What about the mission? How do you got the start of the mission outside of your country?
I went on some mission trips. Well, actually, the first experience I had was inside my country, where right after I surrendered to being in ministry, the Lord called me to go to Miami to start a church. I'd been a Christian for 3 years. I had no training as far as church planting, just God saying go. So me and 2 other guys moved to Miami after Hurricane Andrew, where southern side of Miami was completely wiped out. And people all thought they were going to die.
What years would be that?
It was 1992.
1992, 93.
Yes.
Albania was just open at that time. Democracy started.
And so we would go, and I ended up, I struggled with it for the first 6 months. And then I had to overcome that crisis of belief and respond in faith and action. So I ended up moving there. We went out door to door, talked to people, which everybody said you couldn't do. In 6 months' time, we had a church of about 60 people. We baptized 40 of them.
Wow.
So, and that's 3 guys that had no training,
nothing.
No help.
Just, they know God, they have a Bible, they have a calling.
Yeah. So what does that tell you about church planting?
Yeah, that's a good church planting model, crazy church planting. But how will I interpret that? So people had a need because of hurricane, because of their hurt.
They all thought they were going to die.
Yeah.
And when people think they're going to die, they start thinking about God.
Yeah.
So that's why when people are on their deathbed or they get older, then they start thinking about God again.
And that means God don't waste any situation.
It's a good thing he takes people at the last moment, isn't it?
Yes, super. Your story is wider. Let's go to the next chapter.
All right.
International. Mm-hmm. How old were you when you felt God calling you? So, or maybe, is there something between the Miami church and the international missions?
Yeah, in 1999, I was going to a singles Bible study near my home, and it was at a church led by a guy named Andy Stanley. So it was big church.
Big church. Big church now, but it was big.
It was big then,
even
yes. And on Tuesday nights, they had a singles Bible study called 722. And
so, friends, Joe has been part of Andy Stanley Church.
I wasn't really part of it. I just went to a Bible study there.
But you didn't go on Sunday or only Bible study?
Just on Tuesday night.
Yeah. Okay, still.
Yeah, and there was a guy named Louis Giglio, who's pretty famous in the States now. He was the guy that led the Bible
Passion
study.
guy, the Passion Conference guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was in your Bible study group.
No, he wasn't in it. He led the Bible study.
He led the Bible study group.
There were about 1,200 people in the Bible study.
Wow,
so,
1,200 people.
Yeah, it was basically a service where they had music and he preached.
He taught the Bible.
Yeah, he taught the Bible. And one night he preached from the scripture of Habakkuk 3:14. Mm-hmm. Says, "For the glory of the Lord will cover the earth like the water covers the sea."
Okay.
And God put his finger on me and said, "I want you in mission."
That was it.
And so I left with this new calling upon me. And I went to my home church on that Sunday. My pastor preached from the Bible. Guess what verse he used?
Habakkuk chapter
3:14. Yes, same exact verse. Almost the same message, even though the two guys don't know each other. So,
wow. Well, just reconfirming the call.
It's just God working in my life.
Wow. And then?
So we'll go back to the Bible study the next Tuesday. And Louis Giglio says, well, if any of you were called into mission last Tuesday, and you want some education, then you can take a course called Perspectives on the World Christian Movement. And this church is doing it, so I did that.
Uh-huh. How long was that? Like a few months or a few weeks?
It was about 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. And during that time, my church asked me to be a volunteer mission pastor. Mm-hmm. And I organized a trip to the country of Belarus.
Okay.
And in April of 2001, I went to Belarus on a mission trip with a team. Mm-hmm. I was invited by a Belarusian to come back in July of 2001. Uh-huh. So I went back, spent 2 weeks there doing some work with them. And on the last day, the Lord says, "I want you to move here."
Wow.
So on the way home, I told my friends on the plane I was going to quit my job, sell my house, and move to Belarus.
Oh, no.
So I went home, I quit my job, I sold my house, I raised support, and in October I was living in Belarus. So
few months different.
All in the same year, 3 months later.
3 months later.
Yeah.
Wow. And you went in October, in winter. How was it?
Started snowing in October, it quit in April.
6 months.
Yeah. It was very cold.
6, 7 months, yeah.
But we were very successful there.
Yes.
So.
And there you got to know the love of your life.
There I met my wife. She was my translator.
Yes.
So, and that was an interesting experience too, because I was 45 years old. She was 21. And, but a guy several years before had kind of prophesied over me and told me exactly how I'd get married if I ever got married. And it was exactly the same thing. So
wow.
It was very
So how God is orchestrating.
Mm-hmm.
So just have to be sensitive to his voice, huh?
Yeah. You just have to,
mission,
you have to follow the Spirit of God. So we
beautiful.
say that we're led by the Spirit and driven by faith.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And now you guys together have 2 kids?
2 children, yeah. 21 and 18.
They are not kids anymore.
Yeah, they're big.
Danik is big. And Ali Grace is in the first year university.
Freshman in the university, and Danik is a junior.
Super.
So he has 1
So
year.
yeah, I'll not do a lot of questions about mission, but you did not work only in Belarus. You had some minutes. You spent some.
In Belarus, I started a
Siberia
church.
as well.
Yeah, at Belarus, I started a church that I ended up being the pastor, which was not the original intention. And after 3 years, the Belarusian KGB came in and said that I didn't have the right to do that. So they shut my church down, and they told me I couldn't do any kind of public ministry anymore.
Okay. What happened to the church?
The church moved in with a like-minded Belarusian pastor.
They joined together.
And joined together, and I worked behind the scenes, but at the same time I asked
But
him
you could not be the pastor with a name.
Right. I could not be the public pastor. So I worked behind the scenes, underground with him. But I started talking to him about planting churches, and he said, okay, if you show us how to do that, we'll do it. So I had a piece of paper with 8 things written on it. I said, well, here's the church planting plan.
Just a piece of paper with 8 steps. But you already had started one church, so that church was successful. And then, how did this pastor react? Was he collaborating?
He said this, and later he said, inside I was this.
Yes, but inside, no, this doesn't work.
But in the next few years, we started 6 or 7 churches, which nobody had done. And then after we'd planted about 9 churches, I moved to the Siberia region of Russia and began helping guys.
From cold to very cold?
Very cold, yes.
Does a lot of people live in Siberia?
Yes. We lived in a city of 2.5 million people.
Come on. That's the whole Albania in one city.
Yeah, it's a big city, but very cold. Minus 30 in the day and minus 40 at night for 4 months in the winter.
So in total, you started 9 churches in Belarus, and how many churches in
In 2 years, we started 10 churches in the Siberia region. Yeah.
And then it was a new chapter for you, going back home and equipping leaders.
The Lord called me back home. I didn't really exactly know why. And kind of very emotional even remembering all this.
Yeah.
But God told me we were going to spread out and we were going to go to other countries. And I remember waking up one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I went and sat on my couch and I began to cry. And I said, God, I can't do this. And he says, I know you can't do it, but I can do it through you. So God spoke to me. I went back to bed and got up the next morning, and I had an email from a guy in Vermont.
USA.
Which is godless place. And this guy was a church planter from Florida. And he was the confirming sign from God.
For you.
Yeah.
It's time for
the next morning.
Yes.
So I started looking for opportunities. And I was at a conference one day, and I ran into this guy named Larry McCrary.
Yes.
And he says, hey, Joe. He says, I got this guy in Albania. I don't think I can help him, but maybe you can.
Yeah, that's...
Who do you think that guy was?
Yeah, that was our connection.
That was you. That was our team.
And I never met Larry before.
Yeah.
I only had a Skype call. At that time, it was Skype.
Yeah, that's right. We were old school. We were using Skype.
We were using Skype. It was so hard to log in, though. So through Larry McClary, we got to know each other. And we got to know each other. I think it was like...
almost a year.
Yeah. Not a year, but I think we talked together in October, and next year, February, something, 4 or 5 months later you came, or when did you came first time in Albania?
It was in the fall of 2013, but before that, I asked another guy to come check things out.
Yes. Oh, okay. So that guy came first, and then you came.
And then I came.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and then we start. You joined with us with what God was doing, and together for 10 years you helped in the start of 68 new churches in 10 years. That was amazing. 10 years. And
The amazing part is that we found the money to start those churches. So
that was crazy because you didn't have a bag of money. We just had dreams.
it just came.
Just had dreams.
Yeah.
And the dreams kept growing. One day I remember, maybe it was third year or fourth year, we're sitting just after the conference, and you somehow find the map. I don't know where you find the map. It was me, you, Cadis, and Mariol. And we sat together, you find the map and said, guys, what is happening in Albania is good. What about other countries?
Yeah.
And we talked about Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro. And that was another wave.
And Bulgaria.
Yeah.
I think those were all the countries, but we
And then Croatia.
Yeah, I think we came up with the idea to have the exponential
Growth.
Balkans conference,
Yeah.
and invited all those people to come, and
Yeah.
so that's where we met some new guys, like Alexander Vilatek,
Yeah. Sasha.
the man
Sasha.
from Macedonia.
The man from Macedonia, that was good. Sasha, and then you had the same thing was happening here. So you had in Serbia,
Yeah,
you did the trainings there, in Macedonia,
yeah,
and
in Montenegro,
and Croatia,
Slovenia,
and Slovenia now. A lot of work you have done in this part of the region.
Yeah,
And God have used you in a big way to start only this area 68, but more churches in the other countries. And then we had the break, COVID break.
Yeah.
I mean, break with what we were doing, because meanwhile you are spreading all over the world and the other side of the world.
yeah.
Like, talk a little bit more what is happening in Latin America and Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, India. Oh my goodness, a lot of other places.
Yeah, so right now we're concentrating a lot on Central, South, and Southeast Asia and the Middle East.
Oof.
All right, so
That's 1/3 of the world or half of the world there?
well, population-wise, it's a large portion. South Asia is 7 countries, and 25% of the world's population live there. And in South Asia is Pakistan and India, and Pakistan and India have more unengaged, unreached people groups than the rest of the world combined.
Wow.
So
Only these 2 countries.
only those 2 countries, yes. So God kind of has led me to places to where the gospel is not present, and that has the greatest need and has the fewest amount of Christians, and places that are really tough. So I like challenging things. I guess he prepared me for that. So that's what we're doing now. In the Middle East also, we've got work in 5 of the Arab Emirates and moving and spreading from Dubai out into other places there. So right now we have about 40 churches in those places. So
in the Middle
that's
East?
in 2 years' time.
Super.
So it's going really well.
Yeah, it looks like nothing's happening in Middle East, but a lot of things.
It really
happen
is.
there.
Yeah. They say Iran has the fastest growing church in the world.
Yes, fastest in the world.
Underground.
It's amazing. Looks like it's strange, but the more the suffering and persecution, the more churches spread. Like the old days church, the first church.
Yeah, well, maybe we're moving towards end times of some sort. So nobody knows for sure.
Yeah. I'd like to continue our interview with some more personal questions, so the insights from you that other new leaders can learn.
Okay.
And from your experience, some leadership ideas, leadership skills. So let's move to the the second part of the questions that are more personal.
Okay.
First question is, what has been your biggest decisions you had to take in your life?
Well, the biggest decision, I guess, was to accept Christ.
Yeah, the biggest.
And the next one after that was who to marry. Because if you marry the wrong person, you're going to have a very difficult life. So
choose Jesus, choose the right mate, choose the right wife.
Yeah. After that, it's the challenges that God puts before you that cause you to have a crisis of belief, you have to get over those and to the other side of it, where God can bless you and you can continue to do the ministry and the work that He's called you to do.
Super. And you already shared some moments. 3 books, or 2, or 1, or 4 books that has impacted your life other than the Bible, because Bible is first. But what are some books that have impacted your life?
Well, I read a book every morning called My Utmost for His Highest.
Oh, devotional book.
Yeah, it's by a guy named Oswald Chambers, and he will challenge you every day.
So it's straightforward.
And I've been reading this for more than 10 years every day. And you never get tired, because
there's something new.
Well, it's just such a challenge. He's always attacking you every day and where you're at with God and if you're really surrendered or not. So,
okay. 1. Would you say another one?
Yeah, so after that, I read another book called Jesus Calling, which seems weird, but it's this lady that wrote it named Sarah. I can't remember her last name, but she's constantly reminding you that Jesus is there with you and He's for you, and that
reminding
you to keep your mind on Jesus all the time. So I say Oswald knocks you down and Jesus Calling lifts you up. So
a third book?
I don't really have a third one. So I don't, now, Altine might disagree with me about this, but I don't read everybody's books that come out anymore.
Okay.
I read the book, because you can get too focused on other people's ideas and not be as focused on God's ideas.
Okay.
So
you do a lot of things, because you have your family, you have your ministries, you are in missions, you coach leaders, you do Zoom calls, you do prepare the trainings, conferences, and most of the conferences you invented from the beginning, and that's why you are here in Albania. We're ready for the church planting conference in a few days,
right?
Where we expect 54 teams, 150 plus leaders and church planters. Now my question is, how do you manage time? Because you still have 24 hours.
Well, managing time is managing the organization of your life.
What does it mean?
I do not have any hobbies. So I have God, family, and ministry. Okay. Past that, I don't go play golf. I'd exercise. Maybe that's the one hobby I do to try to keep myself in shape. But I keep things out of my life that will distract me from what I'm supposed to do. And that's how I manage time, because I have plenty of time to get done the things that I need to do. I'm not pressed with a lot of peripheral things that I need to do outside of my God, family, and ministry. So,
how do you relax? How do you rest? What's the right word? Because of so many things. Do you have a typical day, like Saturday, Sunday, or how do you rest? How do you get energy?
Yeah, so I'm 67 now. So in the evenings, I don't do a lot.
So you're a morning person.
I get up early in the morning, 4 to 5 o'clock.
4 every day?
Yes. So if you want to,
and your energy after 2 p.m. goes down, or when you say
by 5 or 6 o'clock,
you're not creative anymore.
I'm not. I don't have anything left.
Yeah.
So I relax. Maybe I'll watch TV or eat something or read something. Just whatever is gonna cause my mind to get distracted to where I'm not thinking about anything.
This is a little more serious now. What are some teachings that you have got from life that you want to pass it to another leader, church planter, that things that you learned in a good way or in a hard way, or so years of ministry? Or what are 1, 2, or 3 of those teachings?
Well, I would say that at beginning in ministry, you want to make things very complex, and that's not going to help you. The simpler it is, the better.
Simpler it is.
So, and like ministry, there are 3 principles. Keep it simple, biblical, and reproducible.
Oh, one more time.
Simple,
keep it simple,
biblical,
and
reproducible. So think of a stool with 3 legs.
Okay.
You take one of the legs away, what happens?
kaput,
Yeah.
falls down.
Yeah, so simple, biblical, and reproducible. If you make it complex, it's probably not going to work.
I can imagine a stool with 20 legs.
Yes.
More confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. I think one thing I've learned in life is to think about the brevity of life and not wasting your life. So
What is the word brevity? I don't know it in English.
shortness of life.
Shortness.
Life is not that long. You have
Yeah.
a certain amount of time
Like
here.
Moses said.
Yeah. So God, when I was 40 years old, my life was technically, more or less half over. Mm-hmm. And I read a book, and in that book, he was talking about, your life's half over, so use the second half of your life to the best of your ability.
Wow,
so I
that's a
began
good
to ask
challenge.
God to do that in my life. And, the next thing you know, I'm living in Belarus as a missionary,
Wow.
doing a completely different thing than I was before. So. And then probably one of the main things in life that you need to learn is how to surrender to God.
That's a good one.
So I get up early in the morning, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. In the morning, my mind can be blank before God to where I can listen to Him. I'm not distracted. I'm not thinking about all the things I have to do during the day. I'm sitting before the Lord, and I have one thing in mind: kill Joe.
Kill Joe.
Yeah,
Kill
because
the
if Joe gets out, it's going to be a bad day. But if Jesus lives through Joe, it's going to be a good day.
That's a good one.
So
Like John the Baptist said, I shrink down, Jesus grows up. What would be the right words from the Gospel of John?
he says, I must decrease, you must increase.
Yes.
So, and then it also says if a kernel of wheat dies and falls to the ground, it produces more wheat, right?
That's a good one.
You have to die to yourself every day.
And that means,
Because yourself and your flesh wants to do things that God doesn't want you to do.
yeah,
So
that's what it means to depend on God, to surrender to God
surrender,
every day.
yeah.
Super. Now it's another question. What are some failures in life? Because we learn from failures.
Yeah.
And what are some successes in life that you can consider this went well, it was a success? And what you have learned from them, because we can learn from both of them. Huh?
Well, I remember one time while I was in Miami planting the church, we were with an older guy that was supposed to pastor the church. And he wasn't performing or responding very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I was an anxious 34-year-old. And I knew what was right to do. And he wasn't making a decision about what he was going to do. Mm-hmm. And I pushed him really hard and ruined the relationship temporarily. And what I learned is that I might know what's right, but it doesn't have to be done right then.
Yeah.
You always give people time to make
Take
decisions and to let them learn from God and be patient. So, and otherwise you can ruin a lot of relationships. So
who was like that? Paul and Silas, or Paul and Barnabas? Who had that conversation?
Paul split with a couple of people, right?
It was Mark, actually.
Well, John Mark
was one of them.
Yeah.
But at the end, they became friends, like your story. At the end, you became
But he
again.
split with Barnabas too, and then he picked up Silas, right? So, one thing I can tell, young church planters is read the book of Acts and read it over and over again. Because
over and over again.
Believe it or not, God's pattern for success is there.
It's there.
And
there's nothing new under the sun.
It still works today. So, and if you want to be successful in planting a church, you need to involve yourself in the same things those guys did.
Yeah, same things. Mm-hmm. Even it is a 21st century old book of Acts.
Yeah.
It's still the same good pattern. Who has impacted your life the most?
Mm-hmm. I've never had a mentor, and I've never had anybody that consistently taught me during my time in Christianity. This can be good and bad. For me, it was probably a good thing because I learned to depend on God and not someone else. So I probably learned more from people like you and the guys that I work with and people that
on the field.
that I'm actively working with, they, they might consider me to be their mentor, but actually it's a dual proposition.
Yeah.
So I'm learning
relationship.
from them. Yeah.
Take
They're
and
learning
give.
from me, but I'm, I've taken things from different people, but I've never had just one person that poured into me.
Very difficult question. How do you deal with problems and critics? If somebody's criticizing you and you are doing nothing wrong, you're just following God, following His calling, and this guy is just after you for no reason. How do you deal with critics and problems?
Well, it depends. If it's somebody that means something to me, then I deal with it one way. If it's somebody that doesn't really mean anything to me, I deal with it another way.
What do you mean? What is it means or don't mean? So it means you know him or he's a friend or
if
how?
I have a relationship
It's a
with
relationship.
that, a good relationship, a strong relationship with that person,
Yeah.
and they're criticizing me, then probably the first thing I'm going to do is call you up and complain to you. So that's my natural reaction. It's, why is this happening? Well, that's getting an opinion from somebody that you trust and care about. And then after that, I guess I would, try to settle the issue with that person directly, which is hard to do. So if it's somebody that I don't really have much of a relationship with, to be honest with you, I don't really care. What God thinks about me is much more important than what people think. So I don't worry that much about what people think. So, but if it's somebody like you, if you started criticizing me, it would be a problem. I'd have to struggle with, and eventually talk to you about it.
Did we have any time? So in our 12 years of friendship, did we have any time like a discussion, tough discussion? Maybe one or two times. I don't remember.
I think that several times we disagree, but the good thing is we always disagreed as friends.
As friends, we never had a
it wasn't a falling out.
Yeah. Super. So at the end, what would you say at the end to a new church planter that has a new, might be a guy or a couple, 30 something years old or younger, that is ready to start a new church? What would you say advises to do and stay strong and things to not worry too much?
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him and He'll make the path straight. It's a simple formula. If you're a new church planter, you need to be sure of your calling. You need to be absolutely sure with a knowing inside of you, this is what God wants me to do, and then go for it. Just like
take action.
Just like Alteen did when he started his church. He was ready to open the church. He didn't have equipment or chairs
until very close on the.
Yeah, but he kept moving. So you have to remember that. And the other thing is I would focus in on the things that really matter. And the things that really matter are not how many events that you can do or how many other believers that you can gather. It's really more about how you can reach people that don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
And if you'll keep them in mind, because too many people living and dying without Jesus all around us. And if you'll care about those things, you'll be caring about the same thing God cares about. So,
what do you see, what the church planters worry that they should not worry? They spend too much time, too much energy in things that should not do.
I think probably church planters, and as well as me and probably you, one thing we worry about all the time that we have to consistently turn to God and trust for is money.
Resources, money.
It's not if God doesn't provide it, you probably shouldn't have it. But if you're lazy and you're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing, then
so we have a part, God has a part.
Right. If I'm doing everything I can do, then I just need to leave it to God and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So He'll provide if He wants to. If He doesn't want to, then that should speak to you from Him.
Super. And finally, tomorrow we start. Tomorrow, I don't know when you see this podcast, but tomorrow is 22nd of January. 22nd of January, we start the church planting conference, and you are the main speaker there. How would you describe the conference? What will happen there? Or what do you expect to happen there?
Well, we call these catalytic events, and we used to call it catalyst community, but sometimes we call it a catalyst gathering. The key word is catalyzing, to where you're kind of striking the match. So the key thing is to reactivate faith in people, because believe it or not,
that's a good one.
The guys out in the field are constantly learning to depend on what they can do, not what God can do. So we want to change that and reverse it back to, let's depend on what God can do, not what I can do, because that's a game changer.
Super.
And God can do much more than we can do. What's my favorite verse, Altine?
Ephesians 3:20.
Yeah, it says, God is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is living inside of you. So, so in this conference, we'll have activating faith, sharing knowledge, tools, information, and trying to create a collaborative atmosphere where people want to collaborate with each other.
And I'm very curious how God will use you, me, Kate, all of us in this new era, because I remember 12 years ago, 13 years ago when we started, it was about 70-something people. It was about half of the crowd. Now after 12 years, it's like a restart again. And we have 54 teams, 150, like double in number of teams, double in number of
the first time
numbers.
we did this, it was in 2013, 14, and we had 50 people.
50 people. And that would be 12, 13 teams or 14 teams. So it's, now we'll see. It's like a new wave. Thank you so much for all the years, all the energy, all the advice, all the resources we have poured in the Christian community, reaching one more for Jesus, starting a new church.
Well, thank you, Altine, and thank you for the small group of Albanians that had a vision to do something bigger than what they could do when I first met you, because that's when God put us together for me to help you to reach something that you couldn't do on your own. So.
Super. And if you're watching this podcast and you are a church planter or a leader, and you got stuck somewhere, maybe you need a friend to give you advice, maybe you need a workshop that fits with what you do, just write us, just follow us on Facebook, Instagram, email. We are all over in social media. So I hope this has been a blessing for them, but it was a blessing for me to refresh all the histories that we have gone through. God bless you very much.
Thank you.